Hey, it's Ariel. So, I'm hoping that this will be an interesting new part of my channel. In a lot of my videos, I've talked about, my personal experiences and stuff in relation to different things, and now I have, a vlog that I'm talking about more stuff. And so I've wanted to make so I have glycemia and I thought it might go down. I brought my juice along here. Anyway, that's my continuous glucose monitor, and if you want to learn more about that, I have videos on it in my vlog and on the other part about what is a continuous glucose monitor. All right, so this is something that is actually, I'm managing it. Let's just say it's insanely difficult, but I'm doing better with having it managed, meaning I'm feeling better when it's managed. Okay, what I was gonna say is that I just wanted to tell stories because I just need to talk about all the things that happened. So many things in my life are related to my health. Like, so many things are related to my illness, and there's so much more than just what happens with what your illness is, or like what it's like, or like just the definition of it. I mean, it's a whole experience of being sick. That's so much more than that. So this one is going to be about acceptance over time. And so I just was going to talk about that. It's not like, oh, it's easy to accept it, so don't worry, that's not what I'm saying. I call that toxic positivity, where you're just like, oh, it's fine, yeah, no problem. It's about over time, and how I feel about it now. So, couple things. Well, so I've had health problems my whole life. When I was a baby, I started having things, different problems. When I was a young kid, I would get sick a lot. When I was 12, I got epilepsy, which there is no known cause for it, so we don't know why, but it seems to be, well, not seems to be, it's extremely affected by my hormones, so that may be why it started then. My seizures, I have, without medication, I have tonic-clonic seizures, which are grand mal seizures, and simple partial seizures, which have now been named focal aware seizures. So I'll probably use the old name right now just because that's what I'm used to more. So I used to have, honestly, it was about once a month that I'd have a tonic-clonic seizure, and it actually had to do with my hormone. Like, that was one of my biggest triggers, was my hormones. So usually the week before my period. So that was like one of the biggest triggers. So it was like I could have something else that triggered it, right? Like, huge amount of stress that would sometimes trigger it. I knew that my hypoglycemia was triggering it, but didn't know how bad it was, basically. Now I know how bad it is, and now that I keep it up, I'm like, damn, that was bad. I wish I could have helped that then, but my blood sugar changes so fast that it's really hard to manage in that way, and when I'm asleep and stuff, it really is hard to manage. But also, there weren't continuous glucose monitors then, and literally, like, it would have been really hard to, I don't even know how it would have worked to try to manage it better than what I did, which is like trying to eat enough protein and not too many carbs and not eat sugar, and like eat enough before bed, and all these kinds of things that would be like, oh, okay, that's your way to keep your blood sugar stable. And it didn't work. So like, it's one of those things. My dad is a doctor. He was doing alternative medicine at the time, pretty much focused on chronic fatigue syndrome, which, funny enough, is what I have now as one of my main illnesses. So, however, the reason that's important is that because sometimes in families of, say, doctors or other professions, the family gets not taken care of in that department. So basically, I almost never went to a doctor. And granted, my dad is like an MD, but he didn't believe in medication, right? So having seizures starting from when I was 12, and then I had like once a month a tonic-clonic seizure, and then more toward the time of my period, I'd have more partial seizures, but I didn't know what they were. So that's one of the worst things that ever happened in my life, which is having partial seizures for 14 years and not knowing what they were. It was so traumatic and so, oh my God, I just don't even, like, it's mind-boggling what it's like to have your brain messed with all the time and not understand what's happening. So, I do not feel very much acceptance about that if my meds are working really well right now. So that's not the category I'm talking about. But what I am talking about is that, at that time I didn't get the help I needed. I, initially got seen, it's like, okay, you have epilepsy. And then my parents didn't have me take medication or anything. So I had many seizures until I was 19, and then I went to the doctor and asked for medication. So, and that worked out better when I was 22 because I almost died and I was in ICU, and then I got a new medicine, and then that one worked to stop my tonic-clonic seizures, and now I have not had a tonic-clonic seizure in 17 years. Many partial seizures, but that was the first one, and that was the most scary, life-threatening one type, The other type are very difficult to deal with and can be really terrible, but, those ones I turn blue and almost die every time. So it's like, that one's a little more life-threatening, like I said. So that was really nice to have that stop. Being a teenager and having health problems and not having anyone to talk to about it was really hard. Because for one thing, I lived in a small town. Basically, all my friends and family were healthy. And there's always things that people have going on that they don't talk about. But there wasn't anybody that I knew of any kind of huge health problem in my group or whatever. And so being around that, and my family is very ableist, like incredibly. So, I was basically taught, like, you never stop moving, you keep going, you exercise constantly, you're always doing something, blah, blah, blah. So rest is not really an option. So that never worked well with having illnesses. But when I was a teenager, I didn't really talk to people besides my very close friends about my epilepsy. And one thing that I've learned is that keeping secrets increases depression. And so that's why I'm adding that to the list. Of things that I was keeping inside and not telling people. And what I've experienced, if you look more at what my partial seizures are like, you'll see that, like, that was insane. And so I couldn't tell anybody because I knew that people would think I was crazy, but it was so hard to deal with on my own, and it was crazy, and I'm amazed I got through it. But I actually don't know how. Like, honestly, it was like a miracle. So when I was 17, I had a bad illness for like 2 months, and we never figured out what it was. And that was kind of the start of my more chronic fatigue illnesses, because there's more than one. So whatever happened at that point, whether it was a virus or a bacteria or what, something happened then, and then I never got as well as I had been before, which still wasn't fantastic, but I was pretty healthy besides my epilepsy. So, then, like I said, stress is really bad for, seizures too. So when I was almost 18 in my senior year of high school, my dad left and had an affair. I say left before the affair because it was like he left even though he was there sometimes. And I was just like, you can't stay here and keep leaving, like that doesn't work. So he left, and that left me and my brother, who was like 14, and my mom. Now, when I was 13, my mom got diagnosed with brain cancer, and so she, during the time that I was 13 to 18, had 2 brain surgeries and chemo and radiation and a laser surgery called a gamma knife. And all of that helped for a while and then went back. So she had an oligodendroglioma, which is like it spreads out tumor. So they would take it out and then it would, grow back, and then they'd take it out. So anyway, after, when I was 19, it was deemed terminal because she couldn't do any of that anymore. So it took 8.5 years till she died from when we found out that she had it. So that whole responsibility of turning, 13 and starting to deal with that really changed things. And then the amount that my mom was able to like parent got highly reduced because of the fact that she was just trying to survive. So in terms of, getting help in those ways, I didn't really have a lot of that. So when my dad left, my mom was really sick by then, and we didn't have any help, right? So it was like suddenly my life was insanely difficult, right? Because I was still having seizures completely uncontrolled. And so I started getting really depressed, and just became highly, highly depressed. And I was in my senior year of high school, and I just I didn't know how to talk about it. So I didn't, because what I was going to say is that secrets, once again, we didn't tell anybody that my dad was having an affair. And so one of my friends, when I told her finally, she's like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, then why didn't you tell me you knew? But anyway, it was like 9 months or something that it was just me and my brother and my mom and my sister who knew it, right? Supposedly, apparently other people had figured it out. But that secret, right? That just adds to the depression insanely. And I think that's such a big deal, because keeping secrets, whether it's health stuff that you don't really want to tell people, or whether it's health stuff you're scared of or you can't tell anybody, or life stuff where like, the shit goes down and it's terrible and scary and traumatic, all of that, can really increase depression. So, and honestly, I guess mental health to me has become more important than physical health, although they are combined. Like, don't get me wrong. But ultimately, what became more important was dealing with my mental health, because all of that physical health stuff, right? Like, that was awful. But by the time I got to 18, I got severely depressed. Then I was having like a terrible time with my seizures and having really bad partial seizures that would cause me to like have, they call it interictal psychosis. So it's when you have too many seizures together, in between them, you can get psychosis. So I would just like be wandering around sometimes because I couldn't even think. So that was all really insane. So I didn't have a place to live, and I was basically like the 3 years or so that I lived in my hometown when I went back to take care of my mom, and my brother was there. And those like 3 years or so, I didn't really have anywhere to live. So I was kind of living in the yard, kind of living in my neighbor's yard, kind of living in my brother's room. But basically highly stressed and having tons of seizures. And so also like not very clear, and then very depressed. And so then I also at that point had an eating disorder, which started when I was 12, but it went on to get worse. And that was when it was the worst, which is why I'm saying that. And one of the reasons all of that was such a big deal, right, is that when all that went down, where my mom's terminal, and, I had a seizure at school because I was so stressed. So that's in the daytime, and most of mine would happen in my sleep. And everybody saw it. And like I said, I had this big secret of like, most people didn't know I had epilepsy. And not that there's anything to be ashamed of, but like somehow that was not clear with my family, and, to me, that it was not something that was okay. And anyway, they never actually acknowledged that anything was actually wrong, like that it was a disability to have seizures, that it was anything besides just you're healthy. So that was one of the biggest troubles, was that from then on, I was treated as a healthy person, right? So I came back from college after a quarter and then was taking care of my mom, and like I couldn't deal with having a job and taking care of my mom and my seizures and mental health, right? So all of that together meant that I was flailing around and sort of doing jobs like at restaurants and stuff for a while, and then I'd do something else or something, but I didn't have any money to live on. So then, like I said, I didn't have anywhere to live, and then I was anorexic, so I wasn't eating a lot anyway, so I don't actually remember eating. And with all of that, that was probably the worst time of my life, right there. And my hormones used to cause me to get suicidal every month. So that's called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Okay, just need to check this again. We're up a little bit. Okay. So once I was 22, then my brother went to college, my mom passed away, and my dad moved to Arizona, and my sister was already in college. So I stayed in my hometown, which was a small town, and you basically have to leave if you want to go anywhere or do anything. And so when I was in high school, that was all I wanted to do, right? But then I had come back to be with my mom. So then I didn't have anywhere to live either. I didn't have a job, you know, stuff like that. But because my mom had died, which is obviously a very difficult thing to deal with, you know, and there's a lot of trauma there. But when I was 22, my seizures, my tonic-clonic seizures were controlled. So life started getting better right then, like at that point. So then I worked at the health food store that I grew up with for 3.5 years and got sick constantly. So at that point, it was like low immunity or whatever we wanted to call it. Nothing that anybody could, you know, figure out, but also that means like everybody treated me like I'm healthy. And that's something that I learned, is that unless you have something that you can say or a diagnosis or something, if you look healthy and you don't have a diagnosis or something, people will treat you like you're healthy, which means the same expectations as somebody who's an adult who's healthy, which I could not do. But I had to work, like, so many decisions in my life have been made of like how to keep health insurance and stuff. So to pay for my epilepsy meds, I had to be on the group insurance for my work, because otherwise I couldn't get insurance, right? Because pre-existing conditions. So that made it so that like I had to work 32 hours a week to get the health insurance, and then that would make me sick all the time. But I still needed it to get my epilepsy medicine because it was so expensive. So that's what I did for 3.5 years, was like constantly get sick with whatever, you know. I had a lot of allergies, so then it's like, you know, sinusitis, bronchitis turns into bronchitis that was chronic, and then I get strep throat or whatever. You know, like every few weeks I would get something that would knock me out of work for a week or something. So it was a really difficult time. And like I said, when you're expected to do what other people do when you're ill, but then everybody acts like it's just like, well, you can go work full time, and it's like, no, I can't actually. So that was really a depressing time too, but at least, you know, my seizures were partially controlled, as in my tonic-clonic seizures were controlled, and my mom had died, which meant that like that problem of taking care of her and her dying was not happening, which was just a very, you know, difficult time and experience. So after that, then I worked at the health food store for 3.5 years. Then I decided to go back to college. I don't know how I did it, but during the time at the health food store, I managed to do my college applications and go back to college. So I had gone to UC Irvine for 1 quarter. I ended up applying to Mills College, which is a women's college in Oakland. And I got in there, and I got really great scholarships. And that made busting my butt in high school more worth it. But my last year I was so depressed, I really don't know if it was worth it. But I got to get into a good college with scholarships. So that was why I did it in high school. Because that's the only way to leave my hometown, right? If you don't have money, you know, and my parents couldn't pay for college. So it was like, either you get really good grades and you get a scholarship to college, or you don't leave and you don't have anything you can do, or like a job or anything except work at like a health food store or something, you know, because there was no college there. There's now a satellite of a community college up there. But there was like nothing you could do, you know. So I went back to college, and so my first year at Mills, I was, I'd worked so hard, right, to get back to college, to be somewhere I wanted to be. I was in the nursing program. I'd always wanted to do some kind of healthcare thing. I knew since I was like 12 and having seizures that I could never be a doctor because I couldn't have sleep deprivation ever. And so, it would have to be something like I wanted to be a nurse practitioner. So it was like there would be a way to have some autonomy and yet still have hopefully like a day schedule that it would not make me sick. So then I was at Mills, and my first year I tried to do everything to be happy, right? So I made friends. I'd had friends at my work where I lived, but still having the secret of my depression and my anxiety and my eating disorder and my seizures was just, I couldn't actually connect with people in a way. And I didn't know that that's probably a big part of it, right, at the time. But, I had friends. I got a job at the gym there, being somebody that, people come in and out. And so I could do my homework when I did it, right? But I was also an obsessive exerciser, which was one of my ways of dealing with my depression. So I wasn't I didn't have lethargic depression. I had like run your butt off and never try to stop kind of depression, where if you stop, you're going to get so depressed that you can't stop. Some people might understand that. So when I did finally stop, which was because I broke my foot, and I started to get sicker, which, like I said, was still unknown what it was. But when that happened, I basically, like I said, I was in school, I was doing what I wanted, had the scholarships, I was doing a fun job, I was taking dance. Failed to mention that dance is my favorite thing to do. Growing up, I did dance all the time, like every day of the week practically. And so I always thought my worst fear was to not be able to dance. So slowly, let's see, so that was my freshman year. So toward the end of my freshman year, when I broke my foot, I ended up really, really depressed and just felt like I felt pretty numb at that point. And also, though, what was the thing was like I thought I could do something to feel better, right? It's either like go to school, get out of my town, get a job, be around people, have friends, do my favorite thing, which is dancing. I was going out salsa dancing in San Francisco. It's like do all the things that I thought would make me happy, right? And none of them could make me happy. And I felt so like, I remember saying to myself, my life is perfect, right? Like my life is perfect. Like I'm doing everything I would think that I would want to do to be happy. And it's miserable. Like, and that just gave me like, and I was working so hard, right? And I'd been working so hard for years to not be depressed that to me, that was the ultimate, like, there's no way I can keep doing this. This is like a living hell. And I can't, no matter how hard I try, it doesn't actually ever get okay. It just keeps being this horrible experience that, like I said, I thought if I get this or that, if I do this, even things, not even get things, but do things that I thought would like, make me happy and stuff. It's like depression sometimes is not about that. So things got really bad. And then I actually asked for help. And when that happened, that was the turning point in my life for my happiness, is what I would say. Because a couple months later, I asked for help with my eating disorder, so I told them about that. I was getting help with my depression, so I was feeling less depressed, so then I was actually able to share with people what was going on, including, like I said, my eating disorder and trying to get help with it. And then I'm gay, so that also was like, another thing that if you're not talking about that, since I knew no one in my hometown that was gay or had epilepsy, right? So those kind of things where you're hiding all that stuff can be very, very, make you very depressed on an exponential level, because also having epilepsy and then having some of my other illnesses are associated with depression and mental health problems. So it's like you just add in all the factors, and it was like 100% chance of me being depressed. So anyway, I started taking meds, and I started doing therapy, and I started doing everything I could do. But the most important thing was that was when I started to get happier, right? And I started to get sicker. And so that crossover has always been something that I think is really important. That was like at the end of my freshman year. During my sophomore year, like maybe in the fall or so, I started switching my epilepsy med, which ended up being just this awful transition with the two, where I got to where like I couldn't look at a computer screen and stuff. And then like both my wrists, I couldn't use them, so I had to stop writing and typing for a whole semester, and like just all kinds of crazy things. And so that kind of stuff. But then I started just getting sicker, right? Like I just started getting where I was so exhausted that I started just being like where I couldn't get up and I couldn't do things. And I was like being, you know, an overachiever for sure. That's definitely my family's go-to. And so I was getting straight A's and doing everything, right? So giving up, I had to start giving things up, you know? And so the first things to go were like physical stuff, you know, because I was in college. It's like I need to keep doing my classes, right? So then I had to stop dancing. And honestly, I didn't really get a chance to grieve about it at that point. It was honestly just like, I can't do this much, so I have to cut out the things that I can cut out. Next, I cut out my job at the gym. Next, I started decreasing my classes. So I was able to do a 2-year program in 2.5 years. And I got some extensions. But anyway, what I mean is that during my sophomore year, it started being where I had to start getting extensions. I had to stop my job and dancing and all of that kind of stuff. So that at the end of my sophomore year, then I had shoulder surgery, and then I did summer school to make up for something in the spring. And then I finished out with the last semester. And by the time December rolled around, I was on disability and like bedbound. So that whole like thing there was extremely hard. However, at the end of my sophomore year was also when I came out, right? So all of those things, right? All those big secrets, you know, no longer have the secrets of my family, my eating disorder, my, epilepsy, but also the epilepsy, like, secrets of the types of partial seizures that was happening. I did a ton of research and learned about them, right? So then I was finally able to talk to doctors about them, and I will tell you another time the whole trauma that happened with that. But ultimately, I was able to get help with that and to understand what that was. So there goes all my secrets, right? I was like actually able to be open, right? And at this point, I was so sick, right? I was like I said, not doing any of the things that I considered to be like the important things in life. Not like just that, but like having friends and going out and, dancing and being involved. I was involved in volunteering it. It was just like all kinds of things that I would love to do, but I was so unhappy. But once I started getting happier, even though I couldn't do those things, that was where it started to turn around. And so getting help with each thing that had to do with my mental health. I mean, I say that because with the epilepsy, some of it's about mental health versus it's really messes with your brain, honestly, which makes sense since it's a neurological problem. But it goes into affecting like mental health so much, more than my other illnesses for me. My other illnesses, which is like ME/CFS, Lyme disease. Now I finally have gotten my POTS diagnosis and hypermobility spectrum disorder last August. And, there's some other things. But anyway, those are the main debilitating things I have. So, and I'll probably think of something else. But anyway, those things of being like exhausted, not having energy, not being able to like work, do stuff, and just getting more and more less able, right? Like less able to function. So then I needed a caregiver, and like that started the whole, I was on disability, I got a caregiver. Since then I have gotten worse. So in the last, I guess it's like 11 years, I have continued to decline in my health, and I'm happier than I've ever been. So, except maybe when I was like 8 or something. But anyway, that's where the reality comes in for me of that was different than I ever thought. And also because of acceptance, a big part of it though was when I started to have the turnaround with my mental health, when I finally gave up and asked for help and was just willing to stop trying so hard and get help instead, then everything started to improve. And then with my depression going down and my anxiety going down and getting rid of secrets and talking to people about stuff and getting more and more help with things, I started to just get happier and stuff. Granted, there's still a lot of PTSD from my seizures, right? Like a lot of PTSD from my seizures, and everything that happened around that, which I think I talked about that in one of my videos. And then you add on like the mental health aspects of that, right? So it can get very, very traumatic. But then I started getting help with that, right? And I met my girlfriend, who we were together for 7 years, right? And she was awesome. Then I got Danny Boy, my dog, sort of fell into my lap, literally. And that was an amazing gift. That really helped with my PTSD, helped with my being able to go out places, because he was helping me when I had partial seizures by, like I could lie down and he would sit there and like take care of me. But anyway, point is that I was still having lots of partial seizures then. And throughout that time, it was rough. Like I had to ask my family for help again, had to ask my dad for help. And one of the things that was terrible about that is that he would only help me pay my rent and stuff if I was doing treatments for my illnesses. So we figured out I had Lyme disease, and then it was like, oh, let's try every treatment under the sun. I did that for 6 years. So part of the acceptance thing that I wanted to talk about also is just the like, over time, it became like, I don't want to do this anymore. And it was harsh. Most of the things I were doing was like harsh on my body. And I was having like herx reactions and getting like really sick compared to even my normal sick, right? And so finally, after like 6 years, I was not better, right? I had gone through phases of getting a little bit better from doing, IVs for a while or something. And then I would get slightly better, and then I would go back to how I was, right? And that whole time in my life, I always continued to do too much, which you may learn with ME is like the thing you can't do if you want to be okay or not progress, right? So I continued to get worse with my illness, and I never have given myself a hard time though. I honestly know I did my best in every way to do what I could to stay alive and be okay. And that involved pushing myself for that whole time, right? Like that just was part of my life. And so I got to a certain point, right? But then I basically decided, like, once I learned I might have like hypermobility, meaning like hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility spectrum disorder, basically a, defective collagen heritable disorder, where that's like a lifelong thing, right? Like it's not going to get better. And once I was getting like having to look at that, it made me realize that there was something freeing about stopping treatments and just accepting, and this was after 6 years of harsh treatments, and really trying. But my family was not there, but I did get there. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, this is way too hard, way too much work, way too bad for my body. Like, if I'm not getting better, then like, my dad still wanted me to try more things. Like, I was like, you know what? No. And so then I knew I wouldn't get help financially anymore, because he would help me out if I was doing treatments. So anyway, it was a very difficult decision to make to stop my treatments, because then it ended up being that I have had to work on how to survive again. Pretty much I've always had to deal with that, but you know, just to an extent again, that has been very, very, very difficult and traumatic again. So that aspect though of realizing that it was freeing to give up trying. And that was similar to, you know, trying so hard to be happy and not be depressed and, you know, do what I thought would make me happier, and then realizing that that was not it, and that letting go. And I called it giving up, which at the time with my depression, it was giving up, but it was giving up trying. It wasn't like, I wasn't giving up on getting help, right? Like that was the thing. Once I finally felt like I was totally in despair, I was like, well then who cares? Why not get help and try it, you know, whatever I can with my depression, since I already am like low, you know, the lowest I could possibly go. And so that is where I think it's different. It's like I stopped trying, which was my best friend's mom one time. I was trying to tell her how I was pretty suicidal, and she told me, you need to try harder. So my family and friends didn't believe in antidepressants. So that was part of the problem, is like never getting help with antidepressants when you have severe depression that is highly related to health problems and also familial problems, as well as like genetic depression, whatever you want to call it, right? That for me, I could not get out of it just by happiness of like doing things, like I said. So that became very clear. So letting it go and doing whatever was best for me with that, right, with my depression. Well, then same thing when I was like, I might have, you know, something that's just gonna go on forever. And it was like, well, if I tell my family, right, or just people in general, like, hey, I'm not gonna get better. Like, I need to just stop trying, right? That means I could actually just chill with this. I could just be okay with, I'm not going anywhere, right? Like, if I can keep my ME from getting worse, like, yes, that's the goal, right? And, you know, the hypermobility is going to get worse over time. So like, you know, try to keep it from getting worse. Anyway, the whole point is like, yes, I'm not going to get better, but, you know, can I stop and not get worse? Because trying to keep getting better didn't work. And part of that is like, you know, possibly having ME, and even if I had gotten rid of the Lyme disease, which I may have because I lost a lot of those symptoms, but the ME was there, and doing the Lyme disease treatments got the ME worse. So when I finally realized that my quality of life sucked, to some big extent because of the treatments I was doing. I mean, they were horrible. It was like literally making me miserable. And they were so harsh on my body. And I realized, I'm like, my body doesn't need this. Like, my body's already like really having a hard time, you know, incapacitated already. So we don't need to make this harder. So I started to really get the whole, like, you know, acceptance idea coming through. And I did make a video about that. And the reason I say, you know, I felt like I gave up with my depression is like, I gave up on trying, right? And I gave up on like trying to do it myself and everything, and let go and opened up to like, you know, getting help and being like able to go from there rather than like trying to do something about it. So it felt similar in a way of, and I think a lot of people consider it giving up, right? Like my dad or other people consider it giving up if you stop doing something to try to get better, right? All it is like not doing anything, right? It's not actually giving up, because if you don't have an illness, you might really think that, but giving up means something totally different than accepting your reality and just like, that's what it is. Like literally, you don't need to be mad at your reality all the time. Like, it's hard. And I've realized my life will probably never not be hard. Like, there's certain things that go on every day, all day, that are just hard, you know, and the fact that I'm dealing with all these different things that then affect my mental health, and like being homebound now. And I mean, there's just so many things that are complicated and just hard that, I'm like, okay, it's probably just not going to be easy ever. Like, it's never been easy, but like, I really don't think it's going to be easy at some point. Now, easier, possibly, and have some ease in my life, maybe. Smoother, I'm always like, can we have some smooth time? Can we have some, like, just coast for a while instead of having things keep popping up that are really difficult? But I finally got help with my last illness on my list in the last few months to start dealing with that, which all of that has been going on since I was younger, and I have never been able to get all of my conditions and everything looked at and gotten help with them. My hypoglycemia, I started getting help with in November, and this is like, these are huge things that have affected my life so much that now that I'm managing some of them, like, it totally changes things. I also thought I would never have more energy. Like, with ME, like, it's incurable, and then like usually you don't actually get more energy at some point. Well, I have ME and I didn't get more energy because of that, but having my hypoglycemia managed, I'm not crashing as much, which used to make me really tired. So there was like this extra tired happening all the time that now is not happening, right? So my ME is still at the same level, but my crashes that actually had to do with my blood sugar are not happening. So that has been so nice. So that has been a nice surprise. I honestly didn't expect that at all. So I've been just like taking it as just like an amazing gift. And for me, having, accepted more my situation, and like I said, also realized that it is not giving up. It is just being okay with what is, which, like, honestly, that's really nice. Fighting reality is like kind of pointless. Like being in denial. Like, I understand denial is one of the stages of grief. So like that happens, And honestly, you have to grieve things when you're ill and you go through all this stuff. It's like I had to grieve every time I lost an ability, right? And I still have to do it. And it's rough, I had to stop knitting in the last year, and it's just like everything. It's like, it's really hard, and it's like you have to grieve losing an ability and all that. But accepting that I can't control that, right? For one thing, to stop thinking I can control my illness, like I will get better, which, after 6 years of trying, it's like, well, maybe I won't, and maybe I just want to be happy, and maybe I just want to do nothing and like not feel horrible, right? Like just be stable for a while, even though it sucks at this level of illness, right? But I was much happier once I stopped doing treatments and just decided to just be okay with where I was. And I still continued to learn stuff about different illnesses and get my other diagnoses, which helped a lot too. Because I've gotten like 3 since then or something. So it wasn't that I didn't stop trying, right? Like, well, didn't give up, right? I did still continue to, work with how to make my life better. How do I learn more stuff? What do I need to happen? I need this doctor to help me with this thing. Like, it's not that I gave up, but I stopped trying to fight the reality of being sick. And I stopped trying to get better. Like, there's something different about like the idea holding on to, I'm going to get better, and it's not okay not to get better, and accepting your reality and then hoping maybe you could get better, right? But that's very different than it's not okay to not get better. Because if that's your reality for years, right, you're just sick for a really long time. And the people in my life always thought it was not okay to be sick, right? Like, that's just what I was around like a total health food community, very health conscious, wellness, new age spirituality kind of ableist community. That was not what they thought, basically. So it took me a long time to get out of that mindset enough to even see that, or like have enough exposure to everything to see that I could have that, right? Like that I could have a different mindset. And that it even existed, right? Like that the possibility of that I could be happy and I could be sick was like, I never thought those two could go together. So once again, it's taken time with the acceptance, right? Like I said, there's stages of denial and everything. And, you know, I've been on disability for like 11 years now. If I was still fighting reality, I would be miserable, you know? And it's like I said, it's not that I don't want to get better, because that's another thing people have said, like, then you don't care about it. I'm like, no, I want to get better. But like, I'm not going to spend all my time fighting against it, which doing constant treatments that make you sick is pretty much fighting against reality. Because, you know, if something's working, maybe that's different. Or like if you try some things, but 6 years of trying everything you can possibly come up with is insane and intense. So it's not that I think it's bad if people do that, but for me, it was finally like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And so, you know, I'm really glad I did that. And it took, you know, I found sort of a lot of support and people, you know, that felt the acceptance was important after a year after I had started really thinking about it and stopping my treatments and stuff, and just really realizing that even though a lot of the people in my life thought it was giving up, that to me, acceptance was just saying, this is my reality. And it's not even that I like this reality, or like, there's something I call like being okay with it, right? Or that it's okay. Like, it's never okay that, you know, I was seriously depressed, and, you know, it's never okay that I'm sick and I can't, you know, leave the house. Like, that's not really okay. I'm not okay with that, right? But there's another aspect of it that is just, it's reality. And honestly, at some point, it's like, okay, I just am gonna be real here and say, yeah, I have an illness. Like, yeah, I'm super sick. Yeah, I'm like housebound. Yeah, you know, and that if I can go beyond the denial and some of the grief, right? Like I said, this has taken time. You know, there's a lot of healing that has to happen, and a lot of going through emotions. Oh my gosh. A lot of therapy, a lot of, you know, group support, and stuff like that, that, you know, has been huge for working on the mental health aspect of being chronically ill. And ultimately, I am happier than I ever was when I was healthy. I am sure that at some point, if my mental health is good and I was healthy, that would be awesome, right? But I really find it important to remember that I was miserable when I was healthier. You know, that it's not actually, you don't have to be healthy to be happy. Like, that was something I never considered, right? Like, the people in my life, it's like the whole point is to be healthy, right? Like, you spend all your time eating right and exercising right and all this stuff, and then you'll be healthy. Well, then that equals happiness, right? I never learned that, like, no, you can be, you know, sick and overweight and uncomfortable and in pain or whatever, and you can still be happy. Like, actually, that's not the whole point of life, is to be healthy. So I'm not saying other people can't have their sort of thing, but it really has made me think about like where I put my time and energy, you know. And I really realized that to me, you know, for me, acceptance and not just constantly trying to fight reality and try to not be how I am, right? Like, to try to be something else is just so hard. I mean, it's exhausting is what it is. And that acceptance was actually just letting go, you know, of, and not trying so much. Like, now I feel like I do things and I work on things that are going to help me get the help I need, and it's actually very productive. I've gotten a lot more things worked on, is what I call it, right? Like, help with another aspect of something that's a problem, you know, like I've gotten even more help with my seizures, and then more help with my hypoglycemia, and then more help with my allergies, and then, you know, stuff like that. It's like, actually, by not doing super harsh treatments constantly for the Lyme disease, I've actually had the opportunity to do these other things, which are also like really important. And I'm actually able to have the brain to do that. And also I even had the brain to like figure some of them out myself, right? And so I had to have the time to do that, which included just chilling with the fact that I have ME and I have, you know, other things. It's like, I just have this, right? And to realize that, you know, being around people that think it's not possible to be happy and not be healthy was really pretty toxic at some point. I needed people to remind me that it was okay. So that's something that can be real helpful, is if you don't have people who support that at all, finding some people who do support you and understand what you're feeling about, you know, accepting and even wanting to accepting. And like I said, just even going through the idea that acceptance is not giving up, or even like that it's okay to give up, or whatever you want to go with. But like I said, also just getting rid of the misconception that you have to be healthy to be happy, that you're giving up if you're not constantly trying to get well, and that it's not okay to let things be real and how they really are. It's not okay to just sit with reality and be like, yeah, that's what's happening. So fighting reality, yeah, like there's just something really, really wonderful about accepting reality. And that is not even have a judgment of it. Like I said, that's not even saying it's good, bad, okay. It's like, this is just what's happening. You know, this is where I am. This is what I'm dealing with. And then how do I survive? How do I go from here? How do I, you know, and ultimately I realized, like, so much more important than doing the treatments to get rid of, you know, Lyme disease was getting help to be, you know, with my mental health, to be happier, right? I have been just as sick or sicker and have been happier than I ever was. So for me, they've been completely the opposite. You know, it's like my mental health started going up and my physical health started going down, and I'm happier here, right? So then I really learned that quality of life is the most important thing. As well as, if I'm gonna not be around forever, like I'm not like, oh, it's gonna die or something, but I have a bunch of illnesses, and it's like my body is not the same as other people's and not as hardy. So, you know, if something were to happen in 5-10 years, it's like, I want to have lived my life, right? I don't want to have spent the whole time trying to be something else, right? I want to have spent some of my time actually enjoying myself, right? And reality. And then it's really important to also learn you can enjoy yourself when you're sick, and it's okay to be happy when you're sick. And it's not like, there's just so many misconceptions about being ill, and chronically ill especially, because it doesn't go away, right? It's not like other people think, like, where you just get better. And it's a whole other world, and a whole other ball game, and a whole other set of rules and experiences. And I think it really takes having other people with chronic illness to like actually talk to them and understand even what you're feeling sometimes, right? Like, I think sometimes other people just like, they really don't understand it, which they don't have it. So it's like, they can't quite get it. It's just where it comes down to in that situation, that, you know, people can be compassionate and everything, but ultimately how to deal with it, it really helps to talk to other people with similar situations. And in this case, you know, being other people with chronic illness. So, I was going to try to make this shorter, but I'm really not good at making things short. So yeah, I'll try. But anyway, it's good to chat. And if you want to hear a particular thing, or, you know, have me expand on one of those topics or stories, I would be happy to. Hey, it's Ariel. Thank you for watching my channel. Please like and subscribe, and if you gotta press the notification button so that you can get notifications. And I hope you enjoyed this. I'm having a hard time getting back to people sometimes, but I do really appreciate you watching it and your comments, and thank you so much.